My name is Rebecca Ellis, and I moved my daughter, Sophie, to Pinewood Grove with a fragile hope of crafting a sanctuary where she could find peace after a life shadowed by relentless challenges. Pinewood was a vision of suburban tranquility streets, lined with towering pines whose needles whispered in the wind, lawns glowing emerald in the morning dew, and the distant hum of children playing on quiet afternoons, their voices carried by the breeze like a soft melody. It was a far cry from the chaotic city we'd left behind, where the blare of horns and the crush of crowds had overwhelmed Sophie, amplifying her struggles. I'd chosen Pinewood to rebuild our lives after Sophie's father, Michael, walked out 4 years ago, unable to cope with her autism diagnosis, leaving us to navigate her needs alone. I wanted Sophie to feel safe, to find joy in a world that often felt like a storm, but peace was a fleeting dream, shattered by Karen Mitchell, the HOA president who turned our haven into a battlefield with her relentless control and spiteful heart. She thought she could dim my daughter's light, thought she could break us with her cruel actions and petty rules. What she didn't know was that I'm not just a mom, I'm a child welfare advocate with connections to dismantle her tyranny. When she covered Sophie's sensory room windows with black paint, I didn't just fight. I ensured she faced a justice that would echo through Pinewood for years. Sophie's 7. A delicate girl with golden curls that frame her face like a halo and blue eyes that shimmer with curiosity, though they often cloud with overwhelm when the world becomes too much. She's autistic and has sensory processing disorder, meaning bright lights, loud sounds, or sudden changes can send her into a spiral of distressed screaming, rocking, her small hands pressed to her ears as she tries to block out the chaos. Her voice is soft, her words often halting, but her mind is a kaleidoscope of wonder, fixating on patterns, colors, and the soothing rhythm of routines. To help her cope, I transformed our sunroom into a sensory haven, a project I'd poured my heart into after Michael left, a testament to my vow to be her anchor. The room was a sanctuary. Soft LED lights in calming blues and purples, a weighted blanket draped over a beanbag, a small water feature trickling like a lullaby, and windows with sheer curtains to filter sunlight into a gentle golden glow. Sophie would retreat there after school, her body easing as she traced the lights with her fingers or hummed to the water's rhythm. Her safe space in a world that often felt too big, too loud, too sharp. I'd sit with her, watching her relax, her breathing slowing, my heart swelling with the knowledge that this room was her refuge, a place where she could be herself without fear. That room was her sanctuary, a lifeline after the upheaval of her father's abandonment. And I'd fight anyone who dared to threaten it. We'd lived in Pinewood for 16 months, settling into a rhythm on Elm Drive that felt like a fragile victory. Sophie's days were carefully structured occupational therapy to manage her sensory triggers, speech therapy to help her express her needs, and quiet afternoons in her sensory room where she could decompress after the sensory overload of school. I worked from home as a child welfare advocate, consulting for nonprofits on child protection policies, testifying in court for at-risk kids, and collaborating with social workers to ensure vulnerable children had a voice. My laptop hummed alongside. Sophie's soft humming, a harmony of purpose as I fought for others while nurturing her. Neighbors welcomed us at first. Mrs. Harper across the street brought brownies with a warm smile, her kindness a balm after our isolating city years. And Mr. Lang down the block nodded as he mowed his lawn, his quiet demeanor a steady presence. But Karen Mitchell marked us early, her presence a storm cloud on our horizon. Karen was a formidable figure, broad-shouldered and bulky, with short gray hair swept back in a severe style and eyes that gleamed with a malice that sent chills down my spine. Her voice was a whip, cracking through the air with authority, and she wielded her HOA clipboard like a scepter, enforcing rules with a zeal that crushed any dissent. a flower pot an inch off-center on a porch. A $60 fine slipped under your door at dawn. A child's chalk drawing on the driveway. A warning letter. In bold, unforgiving print demanding immediate removal. Neighbors whispered complaints at mailboxes. Their frustration a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. But fear kept them tethered to silence, their defiance stifled by the threat of fines or ostracism. I stayed under her radar as best I could, paying dues on time and keeping Sophie's sensory room private, its windows facing our backyard, hidden from the street. But Karen's gaze was a hawk's, sharp and predatory, and Sophie's needs her occasional meltdowns. The faint glow of her room became her target, a focal point for her wrath. The trouble began with complaints about the sensory room, a spark that ignited her vendetta against us. One warm June evening, Sophie was in her sanctuary, the LED lights casting a soothing blue glow across her face as she rocked gently in her beanbag, her fingers tracing the patterns of light on the wall. When Karen knocked, her rap sharp and insistent against the door, a sound that jolted Sophie into a startled whimper. I opened the door, my body shielding Sophie as I faced Karen's glare. "Those lights are a nuisance," she snapped, pointing through the window at the faint glow, barely visible from the street. "They're distracting drivers and violating community standards." I stood firm, my tone calm but unyielding, years of advocacy training steadying my voice. "It's a sensory room for Sophie. She's autistic, and the lights help her regulate her sensory processing. I've reviewed the bylaws. There's no rule against indoor lighting for medical needs." I'd read the documents late into the night, highlighter in hand, finding no violation. But Karen scribbled furiously on her clipboard, her lips thinning into a slash of disdain. "It's unapproved, and it's a hazard," she said, her voice a low growl that sent Sophie rocking harder behind me. "You'll hear from me." She left, her heels clicking a warning on the pavement, leaving a tension that lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Fines followed like a relentless tide. $100 for excessive light pollution, despite the lights being indoors. $75 for unauthorized modifications to the property, though the room was a simple retrofit. Another $90 when Sophie's therapist parked in our driveway for an hour, labeled unauthorized visitor parking. I paid them, my savings dwindling. With each check, each payment, a cut to my patience, a reminder of Karen's unchecked power. Sophie felt the tension, her sensitivity to my moods amplifying her anxiety. One night, as I tucked her into bed, her weighted blanket draped over her small frame, she whispered, her voice trembling, "Mom, does Ms. Karen hate my room? Is it bad?" My throat tightened, a lump forming as I fought back tears. I hugged her close, her curls tickling my chin. "No, sweetheart. Your room is perfect, and so are you. She just doesn't understand, but I'll protect you." But inside, my anger simmered, a fire waiting for a spark to ignite it into a blaze. Pinewood felt the full weight of Karen's grip, its charm eroding under her tyrannical rule. Mr. Lang, a retiree who found solace in his garden, got fined $80. For his wind chimes, a gentle sound he loved as a reminder of his late wife, their melody now silenced by Karen's decree. The Carter kids, 9-year-old twins with boundless energy, faced a $120 penalty for a lemonade stand they'd set up on a sunny Saturday, unpermitted commerce in a residential zone. Karen called it her letter, a cold dismissal of their lass, a cold dismissal of their joy. At the community garden, a space meant for healing, she banned adaptive tools like Sophie's sensory gardening gloves, claiming they ruined the aesthetic and disrupted uniformity, leaving Sophie unable to join sessions that pews. I helped her connect with nature, her face falling as she watched from the sidelines. Neighbors whispered at mailboxes, their voices heavy with resentment and exhaustion. Their one-swarm exchanges now guarded. Mrs. Harper left us cookies on our doorstep, eyes glistening with an unspoken apology for her silence, while Mr. Lang sighed about selling his home to escape Karen's wrath, his garden wilting under the stress. The air grew thick with tension, a palpable weight that draped over Pinewood's once lively streets, turning smiles into wary glances and laughter, into hushed murmurs of discontent. I shielded Sophie with routine sensory play with her favorite textured toys, story time under her weighted blanket. Her sensory room, a haven of combat to Karen's shadow, loomed larger with each passing day, her clipboard a constant specter, haunting our peace. It was a chilly December morning, frost clinging to the grass like a shroud, a prelude to winter's bite, when Karen struck with devastating force. Sophie was at school, her aide ensuring her safety through the sensory challenges of a classroom. And I was on a call in my office, advocating for a foster child's placement in a stable home, my voice steady as I negotiated with a social worker. When my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Harper, "Rebecca, your backyard Karen's there. It's awful. Hurry." My stomach dropped, a cold dread seizing me as I ended the call mid-sentence. I rushed outside, my footsteps pounding the hardwood floors. Finding a small crowd, Mrs. Harper wringing her hands, Mr. Lang with a furrowed brow, the Carter parents frozen in shock staring at the sensory room windows. Black paint coated the glass, thick and dripping, a dark veil that blocked the light. Sophie needed, the room's gentle glow extinguished as if snuffed out by a cruel hand. Streaks of paint ran down the walls, smearing the soft beige paint I'd chosen to soothe her. The paint can discarded in the grass, its lid off, a taunting remnant of the act. My knees weakened, the air stolen from my lungs as I stared at the wreckage, my vision blurring with tears. This wasn't just damage. It was an assault on Sophie's safe space, her lifeline, a deliberate act to hurt a child who'd already endured so much. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, her smirk venomous and unrepentant, a predator gloating over her prey. "Those windows were a blight on the neighborhood," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd with a false righteousness, her words a dagger to my heart. I fixed it for everyone's sake, maintaining property standards. Neighbors gasped, their breaths visible in the frosty air, but no one spoke, their fear a palpable barrier. Mrs. Harper clutched her coat tighter, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Mr. Lang shook his head in disbelief, his hands trembling. The Carter parents whispered to each other, their twins peeking from behind them, wide-eyed. I stepped forward, my voice low and dangerous, honed by years of advocating in courtrooms for children who couldn't speak for themselves. "You vandalized my daughter's sensory room, Karen. You targeted a disabled child, and you'll pay for this." Karen laughed, a harsh, grating bark that echoed off the fences, cutting through the morning chill. "Good luck proving it. I own this neighborhood, and you're nothing." She turned, clipboard in hand, and strutted away, her heels crunching on the frost, oblivious to the fire she'd ignited within me, a blaze of maternal fury and professional resolve. I called the police, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and grief as I dialed. An officer arrived, a middle-aged woman with a weary demeanor surveyed the scene, the black paint, the can, the darkened room. Man sighed. "Without witnesses willing to testify, it's a civil matter," she said, her tone apologetic but firm. Mrs. Harper fidgeted, her fear of Karen's retaliation a chain around her courage. Mr. Lang muttered, "Not worth the trouble with that." Woman and the crowd dispersed, leaving me alone with the wreckage, my heart pounding with the weight of what I had to do. When Sophie came home, her aide wheeling her through the front door, I sat her down in the living room, away from the sensory room, my throat tight with the weight of the truth I had to soften. "Sweetie, someone painted the sensory room windows black," I said, my voice gentle, trying to shield her from the full impact. "We'll fix it, I promise, but the lights won't work right now." Her face crumpled, her hands flapping in distress, a high-pitched whine escaping her lips as she rocked harder, her body trembling. "No light. Mom, I need my light. It's dark. It's bad," she cried, her voice breaking into sobs, her hands pressing against her ears as the sensory overload of the change overwhelmed her. I held her tightly, her weighted blanket draped over us, my heart shattering as she sobbed into my chest, her tears soaking my sweater. I rocked her gently, humming a lullaby I'd sung since she was a baby, my own tears falling silently as I whispered, "I've got you, Sophie. I'll make it right." That night, I transformed into a force of justice, my grief channeling into purpose. As a child welfare advocate, I'd fought for kids in court, worked with judges to secure protections, and collaborated with investigators to expose abuse. I documented the vandalism, meticulously photographing the black paint, the discarded can, the darkened room, noting timestamps and angles, my advocate's mind cataloging every detail. I cross-referenced HOA records on my laptop, pulling up Karen's history of fines against vulnerable residents, a pattern of harassment emerging like a roadmap to her malice. I called Detective Maria Torres, a trusted contact from my advocacy. Work Hood helped me expose a neglectful foster home last year. "Karen targeted Sophie's sensory room," I said, my voice steady but edged with fury as I sent the photos, the timestamps, the HOA records. "She's autistic, and this room is her lifeline. I need a case built, Maria." Maria's voice was firm, a lifeline in the chaos. "That's vandalism, Rebecca, and given Sophie's disability, we can push for a hate crime enhancement. I'll investigate every angle, witnesses, prints, footage. Give me 5 days to build something airtight." While Maria dug into Karen's actions, I reached out to the community for support, my advocate's instinct guiding me to build a coalition of allies. I posted on a local autism support group, masking Sophie's name but sharing her story with May. Before story with raw honesty, a disabled girl's sensory room vandalized by a neighbor, a call for justice and solidarity to restore her safe space. Responses flooded in, parents offering to repaint the windows, a local sensory therapist donating new LED lights, a contractor named Alina volunteering her time and materials to restore the room, a fundraiser started by a mom from Sophie's therapy group raising $700 in 2 days. Sophie's room became a symbol of resilience, a rallying cry for families who understood the importance of safe spaces. And Karen had no idea the tide was turning against her, a wave of support building to crash over her reign. In Pinewood, Karen escalated her campaign, her spite a wildfire-consuming reason. She sent a $200 fine, claiming the painted windows violated community aesthetics and posed a visual hazard. Her letter, a smug taunt that mocked Sophie's distress. She cornered Mrs. Harper at the mailbox, accusing her of snitching. About the incident, her voice a whip cracking against the morning quiet, Mrs. Harper's face paling as she hurried away. She glared at Mr. Lang's garden, muttering about another fine for overgrown weeds, though his roses were pristine. But her power was waning, cracks forming in her dominion as neighbors began to speak up. At the community garden, Mr. Lang whispered over a row of tomatoes, "She'll find me for my roses," said they were too red. The Carter parents nodded. She banned our kids' chalk drawings, called them graffiti. I seeded the neighborhood app with a subtle call, HOA meeting. Bring your concerns and stories. Let's speak as one. Karen didn't notice, too engrossed in wielding her clipboard like a scepter, blind to the murmurs growing into a roar of defiance. Maria called 5 days later, her tone sharp with discovery, a detective's satisfaction in her voice. "Karen's dirty. Rebecca," she said, her words a hammer striking nails into a case. "She's got a history of targeting. Vulnerable residents, elderly, single parents, disabled families. She's manipulated fines, fabricated complaints, even forged signatures on HOA documents to justify her actions. Your photos, Mrs. Harper's reluctant statement, and a neighbor's security footage from across the street, Nail Hirsch, cis. Nail Hirsch, cis. Nail Hirsch, cis. Mog, male mogged in, maze. And Alivers, mazes slash. Maze, maze. Maze, maze. Maze, maze. Maze, while maze cowlers, maze calf. Maze cows, maze calf. Maze, 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 maze. Maze calf, maze case, case consid. K may, as, coset, pi my las. Prite end for you to siv it as it seb. My silis pit it da kasa we belet the sikipit bs let's kit guy situ sit it with it sit it a gabis kiskadok kistis this good on camera with the paint can spraying the windows at 8:47 a.m. We searched her garage under warrant. The paint can's a match, and her prints are all over it. Charges were filed: vandalism, intentional property damage, emotional distress with a hate crime enhancement due to Sophie's disability seeking, $18,000 in damages and restitution. "We'll bury her in court," Maria said, her confidence a bolster to my resolve. I imagined Karen's smug face crumpling under the weight of a subpoena. Her clipboard powerless against the law, and it fueled my every step. The HOA meeting was a powder keg, a dam about to burst under the pressure of years of oppression. I rallied neighbors through quiet talks over fences as frost melted. At the mailbox as the sun rose. At the garden where Sophie once watched from the sidelines. The community center overflowed, chairs scraping against the floor, voices buzzing with defiance and pent-up rage. Karen sat at the front, clipboard poised like a shield, her smirk intact, a queen on a throne of paper, oblivious to the storm, about to break. I walked in, not as Rebecca, the quiet mom, but as Rebecca Ellis, child welfare advocate, with a tablet and USB drive. My credentials a silent threat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Whispers trailed mere recognition from those who'd seen my name in advocacy reports, heard my testimony on the news as I took the stage, plugging in my evidence with a steady hand, my heart pounding with purpose. Karen Mitchell vandalized. "My daughter's sensory room," I said, my voice carrying over the room with the authority of a courtroom. Projecting photos, the black paint coating the windows, the streaks running down the walls, the darkened room that had once been Sophie's sanctuary, now a tomb of her distress. Gasps rippled through the crowd, a wave of shock and anger swelling. Sophie is autistic with sensory processing disorder. Her room is her safe space, her lifeline to calm in a world that overwhelms her. Karen painted the windows black to hurt her, to exert her power over a child who can't fight back. I showed her fines, a stack of paper cuts against our peace. Then Maria's evidence. The security footage of Karen with the paint can, a Kira figure unmistakable as she sprayed the windows, the time stamp damning. The room erupted, a volcano of voices unleashed. Mrs. Harper stood, her voice trembling but resolute. "She fined me $70 for my garden lights. My grandson loves them." Mr. Lang shouted, "She targeted my roses, called them to red." The Carter parents added, "She banned our kids' chalk drawings, said they were graffiti." Mrs. Evans, an elderly widow I'd barely spoken to, rose. "She fined me for my cat's collar bell." Voices piled on decades of tyranny, spilling out in a cacophony of rage and relief, a chorus of grievances long suppressed. Karen's face reddened, a flush of panic beneath her defiance. This is a lie. A setup by this woman. She screamed, slamming her clipboard. The sound? A hollow echo against the crowd's roar. But I played the footage, her figure clear, her actions undeniable. The crowd chanted, "Out! Out!" The HOA board, 3 nervous men in ill-fitting suits, conferred, their eyes darting to the angry sea before them. "Karen Mitchell is removed as president," the chairman declared, his voice barely audible. Over the cheers, she stormed out, her clipboard crashing to the floor, her heels echoing into the night. Her power, a shattered illusion swallowed by the darkness. The trial was a reckoning. A courtroom stage where justice took center stage. A battle I'd fought many times for other children, now for my own. Maria presented the evidence with precision, the security footage. The photos of the blackened windows, the paint can with Karen's prints. Sophie's tearful testimony via video, her voice breaking as she said, "No light. Mom, I'm scared." It's all dark, her face a mirror of vulnerability and distress, her hands flapping as she spoke. I testified, my tone steady but raw with the weight of my dual roles as mother and advocate. She stole my daughter's safety, left her in sensory distress, a child who relies on that room to function. Sophie asked why, and I had no answer but to seek justice for her. My throat caught, and I gripped the stand, picturing her sobs. Her trust in me, the darkened room, a symbol of our struggle. Karen's lawyer floundered, spinning tales of community service and aesthetic intent. But the evidence was a guillotine footage. Prints, her own HOA records, Mrs. Harper's corroboration. The pattern of targeting vulnerable residents. The judge, a contact from my advocacy work who'd once praised my testimony in a custody case, ruled with a gavel's finality, guilty of vandalism, intentional property damage, emotional distress with a hate crime enhancement. Karen got 9 months probation, a $20,000 fine, $8,000 to repair the room, $10,000 for Sophie's distress, $2,000 punitive and a permanent ban from HOA rolls. Her name struck from the rolls with a court order. Her reputation crumbled, her house soon adorned with a for sale sign. A silent witness to her fall, her name a cautionary tale whispered in Pinewood shadows. Sophie's sensory room was reborn. A testament to community and resilience. Alina, the contractor, repainted the windows with a UV filtering glaze, ensuring the light was perfect, while the sensory therapist installed new LED lights with adjustable hues. Neighbors pitched and Mrs. Harper sewed new curtains. Mr. Lang brought sensory toys. The Carter twins drew a welcome back chalk mural on our driveway. At a neighborhood event in the community garden, Sophie smiled, tracing the lights with her fingers, her body calm, her voice humming softly as children played nearby. Pinewood healed under new leadership. Mrs. Harper, with her gentle resolve, took the HOA presidency, lifting Karen's oppressive rules with a smile and a promise of inclusivity, her first act to approve adaptive tools in the garden. Neighbors waved, brought gifts, Mr. Lang's roses in a vase, the Carter's chalk for Sophie's sensory play, Mrs. Evans' offer of a cat playdate. One warm evening, as the sun set in hues of orange and pink, Sophie and I sat in her sensory room, the lights glowing softly, the water feature trickling a lullaby. She looked up, her eyes bright. "I'm safe, Mom. My room's happy again," she whispered, her hand finding mine. I hugged her, my heart swelling, the void Michael left filled with this moment of triumph. Karen tried to dim her light, too. Erase her peace, but Sophie shone brighter than ever, a beacon of resilience in a world that finally saw her. I'd made sure of it, and Pinewood was ours again, its streets alive with hope and unity.